Welcome everybody to another episode of Howling with the Wolfe. Just got back from Buffalo earlier this week. It was not cold. I am so happy that it was not super cold. Looked like a fool out there with my winter coat for a little bit. But back here in Miami, where it's 85 degrees every day of the year. But yeah, I want to go ahead and talk some football. Have some good stuff for you guys today. Definitely want to talk about the Fitz Bowl on Monday Night Football. Got an extra day this week for Dolphins fans. Minkah Fitzpatrick, Ryan Fitzpatrick. They had this whole nickname thing back in the day where they were fighting over this Fitzmagic nickname. Now they get the square off. They know each other pretty well. Definitely want to talk about all the elements of that. I have some inside the locker room, some really good inside the locker room stuff for you guys this week. We're going to talk about beards. And I'll just leave you with a little snippet. We're going to go through Ryan Fitzpatrick's journey with the beard, talk about preferences, how he's come about this, and what he thinks about James Harden's beard compared to his. I'm going to give you guys all of that along with some other stuff. And then I want to talk about trade rumblings. King and Drake, Devontae Parker. These are, I guess, a couple names that probably are going to be talked about a lot over the next 3, 4, 5 days up until the trade deadline. I want to give you guys kind of nuggets of what I know about that, and we'll kind of go from there. And as always, I'm open to take you guys questions about anything. I do want to say that I said on this platform last week that I thought the Eagles would beat the Cowboys, and the Cowboys really jumped on them boys. So I've got to say that I was wrong. And man, that was a beatdown. So just wanted to say that off the jump, and we'll kind of go from there. So first things first, I definitely want to talk about what's going on this week, what's going on with the Fitzpatrick Bowl, whatever you want to call it. Monday Night Football, it's an ESPN game, so obviously I'm gonna pump that up. But I think that it's a good chance for a lot of national fans to kind of see exactly where we are with the Dolphins at this point in the season. I know I talked to a lot of people nationally, and they're sort of are the Dolphins tanking? Are the players and coaches tanking? What's sort of going on? And I think that people might be surprised to see how competitive this Dolphins team is these days compared to where they were before. I don't think they're going to win, but I do think that they're fighting hard. They're coaching hard. He's only played for 8 teams, but I think that he showed me every picture, and some of the pictures, I think the Jets picture, he had no beard completely. For I think the Buffalo picture of one of his later days, he had like a stubble beard, like not too much thicker than what I have right here. And he was kind of showing that. And then he had another cut, which he said was his wife's least favorite cut. It's live. His wife's least favorite cut, where he had a low haircut and the full beard like he has now. And he said his wife hated that one. He did look a little older. So we spent like 5 or 10 minutes talking about these beard conversations. He did say that his kids love the beard, the thick beard that he has now. That's their favorite beard. They get mad at him when he cuts the beard because that they love talking about it, and they love everything about it. And my thought is, I think that he said he usually gets the beard, makes him look older. Some of his teammates were we had a group conversation about this point. Durham Smythe was right over there. Some of the tight ends, he's in the tight end section of the room, said they thought it made him look younger. And I agree. I think it adds to his personality, the Fitzmagic vibe. So I told him I'm pro beard. Keep it the rest of your life if you can. And if you got to get your wife some extra flowers or something every time to kind of have her deal with the beard, then maybe that's part of it. But he said he loves it. So that kind of beard story was interesting to me. I don't know if you guys cared about that. But I felt like that was something that I wanted to share. Another beard topic that popped up in that locker room today, it was beard day. I don't know, Thursday, beard day. I don't know what happened. But Fitzpatrick, who, I will say this, like, he may not be a great quarterback, but I think that he's one of the best, personalities in this locker room. He told us about Chris Reed and Evan Bain. Boom. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. 2 of their interior offensive linemen that they picked up this offseason. They look very, very similar. He said last week in TSA he got them mixed up because they, like I said, they both were like 300-plus white guys with short hair and a red beard. and he said he got them mixed up, and he was telling the story about how one of them lost some weight, so he kind of matched the size of the other one, and how he tried to tell them apart, but he couldn't, and he mixed them up. And offensive linemen don't really talk a lot in the locker room, but all the TV cameras went to them after that happened, and they ended up being the stars of this locker room session. Local TV stations kind of ran up to them and asked their opinion about their look-alike syndrome. They tried to fool a few reporters by saying, "Hey, I'm Chris." Evan said, "I'm Chris." Chris said, "I'm Evan," and they fooled a few folks for a minute, but they didn't fool me. I'll tell you that. I knew them from apart. So, two cool bigger stories, at least to me, that kind of give you a little bit of personality and energy into this kind of winless Dolphins season. So I have one question here from Canadian Mike 777 that I want to go ahead and answer. He said, if the Bengals get Tua ahead of us, who do you think we draft? Very popular question in the Dolphins fan base because it's Tua or bust for a lot of people, and maybe even the Dolphins too. I think that ultimately, I think quarterback or bust for Miami. And, I don't even want to think about a scenario from a Dolphins fan perspective where they don't get Tua or whoever their number one quarterback is. We're assuming that Tua is their favorite quarterback. It could be Justin Herbert. It could be Joe Burrow. But I think Tua is the favorite at this point. I think that, they have the capital to trade ahead of the Bengals or whoever if they need to. The problem obviously would be convincing that team, but they have 3 first-round picks. They have 2 first-round picks next year. They have 9 top 2 picks over the next 2 years. So they have the capital to really move their weight around however they want. And Chris Greer kind of joked earlier this offseason when we asked him about this trade. He said, we can do whatever we want. And he's essentially right. He's the kingsmaker of the NFL draft. But I will tell you guys, for Dolphins fans who are worried, the Bengals are your biggest competition. We do ESPN does an FPI draft ranking every week, kind of projecting what the order is going to be. And the Bengals have been number 2 every single week for the most likely to get a pick. So right now, I think the Dolphins are about 73% chance to get that number 1 overall pick, and the Bengals are like number 16%. So that week 16 battle, which we may end up naming the Tua Bowl, probably is going to have a big hand in deciding the number 1 overall pick. But I will tell you guys a stat that's probably important for Dolphins fans to know. Never in NFL history in a 16-game season has a team that finished with 0 wins or 1 win not finished with the number 1 overall pick. So for people who worry that, hey, you got to go winless to get the number 1 overall pick, history has told us that's not true. Maybe this year is different, but I believe the Dolphins could get away with winning 1 game and still get the number 1 overall pick. It depends on which one. Maybe don't win the Cincinnati game, but I think that they can go ahead and do that. So, question from Ford Tower: what I'm more interested in is if the Dolphins tank works, will others do it too? I think yes. Let's see. That's a very interesting question. I know that the NFL owners meeting happened last week in Fort Lauderdale, and they had some of these questions about tanking, and are you going to outlaw? And the NFL simply said no, essentially. Like, they're not, they don't think anybody's tanking. They feel like everybody's being super competitive. And they're sort of happenstance with what is going on in this league. So even if they did kind of do something to fix this, it wouldn't happen until future years. And the problem with trying to legislate tanking is that you sort of have plausible deniability. Like, no team is going to come out and flat out say we're tanking. Like, the Dolphins have sort of labeled this processing. So if you remember the Philadelphia 76ers of the mid-2000s, the Sam Hinkie era Philadelphia 76ers, the Cleveland Browns of recent years, 2016, 2017, they kind of went through a similar process where they said, hey, we're going to be bad for a year or two, and hopefully we can turn it around with draft picks and money. And ultimately they went about it that way, and we moved on. So I think for the NFL perspective, they think maybe this is a once every few years thing, and they can deal with it. So yeah, I could see teams going about this way because, for the Dolphins, they were stuck in mediocrity for so long. And for teams, there are a lot of teams that are stuck in that period. The quickest way, in Dolphins' perspective, to get to the top is to hit the bottom. So yeah, I mean, if you can sell your fan base, and the Dolphins are currently selling their fan base on it, then that's the biggest issue, I think. And then figuring out how to deal with your locker room is probably your second biggest issue. And the Dolphins have figured out, hey, if we get rid of most of our really good players, then there won't be that many players to complain about what we've got going on. So yeah, I definitely think that this is a method that teams will duplicate if the Dolphins do it successfully. The problem is successful. What do you deem as successful, and how can they be successful? They have all the picks, they have all the money. What do they do with it? And is that a proven way to build a team? Tanking is not the only way to build a championship contender. The Patriots didn't tank to become a championship contender. The Eagles didn't to tank to be a Super Bowl champion. The Seattle Seahawks didn't tank. So most teams don't have to tank to get there. But for those other teams, I do think this is a method that you could see duplicated. Let me see. Trent Arnold said, always enjoy your posts with cap space and picks. Do you think this could be a quick rebuild? Define quick. When I've sort of got a timeline on what people have asked, how quickly do I think this can turn around? I think that 2021 is the first year I believe that they can be competitive to the point where they compete for a playoff spot. I know the Dolphins have sort of internally said, hey, maybe 2020 we can compete for a playoff spot. There's so many holes in this roster. I just don't think it's realistic for them to compete next year. I think next year, if everything goes right, if they spend a lot of money, if they get these draft picks right, then maybe they're a team that's competing for 5-11, 6-10, that sort of team. Like, not embarrassing like they did this year, but not in the playoff contender mode. 2021, I think they can compete for a wild card spot. Maybe depending on what the Patriots are, maybe they can start making their first entryways in the AFC East. But I think 2022 is that 3-year rebuild that you can kind of finally say, hey, this team should be a contender by this point. If they build this thing right by 2022, I think that's the guideline where we really need to say, hey, this is the make or break year for Brian Flores, for Chris Greer. Where is your team at? So for me, that's the timeline. Do you define that as quick? Compete for a playoff spot in 2021, competing for a Super Bowl in 2022? I think that's quick, but if you're talking about 1 year, I don't think it'll happen that quick. Ben Baby covers the Bengals, said, can confirm the Bengals are bad. Yes, they are. I don't know if their Dolphins bad. I guess we'll see Week 16, but that team's got a lot of badness going on. Let's see. Vieira Carrera saying, what are the most needed positions other than quarterback? I did have a question from Canadian Mike earlier about this. Who do they go to if they don't go quarterback? And I'll answer that together with this one because I kind of, filibustered through that answer. Edge rusher and offensive tackle are their number 2 and number 3 most important positions, I think. If they don't somehow get Tua or they don't take a quarterback for whatever reason, which I think is a very low possibility, Chase Young, I think out of Ohio State, is probably the best non-quarterback prospect currently in the draft. He could be a guy that intrigues you. They have 3 first-round picks, so with those other picks, left tackle, defensive end / outside linebacker, maybe a receiver, maybe get Tua, one of the Alabama receivers, probably Henry Ruggs, not Jerry Jeudy, because Jerry Judy's probably going to go higher in the top 5 or, early portion of the top 10. Offensive line is going to be, they're going to have to draft 2 or 3 offensive linemen, in my opinion, to get this thing right. So those are the most needed positions, in my opinion. On Your Hot Dog says, on Your Hot Dog, we get the first claim for Josh Gordon if he hits waivers correct. Odds we claim him and trade Parker. Yes, they do get the first odds on Josh Gordon. I thought about this a little bit. It's interesting. If they feel like, hey, this is a value move for us, and the value is, hey, even if you don't really care about his production this year, and as an 0-6 team, they shouldn't. You can potentially get a compensatory pick or trade him in the future. The other issue is that you have to deal with, managing some of the issues that he's kind of battled throughout his career with substance abuse. Are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable doing that as part of your responsibility? I think they should take a flyer. There's no harm in it. He's making very little money, but for a team that's this early in the rebuild, that would be more of a win now move. So I'm not sure if they'll do it, but I think that I think there's future upside in the move as well. So I'm not sure if Josh Gordon would love to go to an 0-6 team, but I think from a Miami perspective, why not? What do you have to lose? And then for Devontae Parker, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Devontae Parker in the back end of this in a couple minutes about the trade talk. But I do think that Devontae Parker has interest on the trade market. For the Dolphins, he has a relatively reasonable contract. It's just up to whether the Dolphins feel like he's a part of their future. They gave him one more year essentially to say, can you be what we thought when we drafted you? And he's actually having a pretty solid year. It hasn't been number one receiver year, but it's been a solid year. So, do they take advantage of it and trade for more draft picks, or do they say, hey, Devontae Parker can be here when we're good? Sort of an internal conversation that they have to have. Let's see. Got some few comments here. 2021. 2021 is definitely a year where you could look for him to compete. Ford Tower saying, considering how the NFL is a copycat league, I wouldn't be surprised if bad teams saying, yeah, we talked about that a little earlier. I do think it'll be something that'll be reciprocated. Ben Baby again saying, do you like your odds this week against Rig and Riggs? Fantasy football conversation. We're in an ESPN NFL Nation League, and I'm playing Ben Baby this week, and I am not super optimistic about my chances simply because I've had extremely bad luck over the last few weeks. I'm in 4 fantasy leagues, and I'm either 6-1 or 7-0 in 3 of them. In the one league I'm with the ESPN NFL Nation writers, I'm 2-5. But I looked at my standings. I have the most points in that league scored, but I have 5 losses. So I've got extremely bad luck in that particular league. So I don't know. Maybe this just isn't it for me this year. So I'm hopeful that I can beat you in Rig and Riggs this week, Ben. But luck has not been on my side in that league. So I'm not super optimistic. And final thing, I want to chat with you guys a little bit of trade deadline talk. I get a lot of these questions on Twitter, on social media. The trade deadline is 5 days away. Today's Thursday. Trade deadline's Tuesday. So I want to give a few quick thoughts on that, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. I will tell you guys that the Houston Cougars are playing right now on ESPN. I'm going to be open. This is not the best Houston Cougars team. De'Aaron King redshirted the quarterback, who I thought was a Heisman candidate. He's redshirted in 2020. That's a questionable decision in his own right, but that's what he's doing. So I don't know if we can beat SMU, but it's Houston versus Dallas, so I got to rep my school always. So go Cougs. I think it's going to be a much more entertaining game than a Thursday night football game. So if y'all are looking for some good football, I hope turn it to ESPN. Okay, trade deadline talk. Kenyon Drake, I think, is the most likely Dolphins player to be traded. And we've kind of asked him in the locker room about this over the last 2 weeks since it seemed apparent that he could be a guy that could be traded. The Dolphins have pretty much decided that Mark Walden is their lead back, and he's getting that burn going forward. And I think that Kenyon Drake, who's in the final year of his deal, isn't in the Dolphins' long-term future. He said they haven't had any significant trade, contract talks. So I think that if they get the right offer, is gone. What that right offer is depends on how the Dolphins see Kenyon Drake. I think if they get a 5th-round pick, that should be enough for them to move on. They may be holding out for a 4. That's probably what they're bargaining for at this point. Can a team give them a 4? Will a team get them a 5? Will they have to settle for a 6? I think it's somewhere in that early 3rd day range where they're trying to figure out what they can get for Kenyon Drake. But I think if they get the right offer, that Kenyon Drake will be somewhere else. I will say that it's Thursday night when I'm recording this. If a team's looking to trade for Kenyon Drake, they're probably not looking to do it for this Sunday. Like, he's not going to be ready to go for this Sunday. So I think if he's traded, it's more likely that it would be a deal that's a Monday or Tuesday right around the trade deadline deal. So I think that's something that, we may be down to the buzzer for that. A couple other names that I'd probably keep an eye on, obviously Devontae Parker, I talked about him a little earlier. I think it's not something where the Dolphins would, need to get rid of him, but I think there's a lot of receiver needy teams on this market. We just saw Mohamed Sanu go for a 2nd-round pick, which was crazy to me. But it's the Patriots, so it probably ends up working. Emmanuel Sanders went for a 3 and a little more. And he's a really good receiver, but he's 32 in the final year of his deal. Robbie Anderson from the Jets, I just saw today that he's probably going to trade market. So, receivers are like gold these days. So if the Dolphins feel like they can get a 3 or a 4, for Devontae Parker, maybe they pull the trigger. I think there's not a lot out there for them to trade for. Xavier Howard's obviously the biggest talent on their team, but I just don't think that it makes sense for them to trade Xavier Howard because he is their core piece, like the piece, the head honcho. So I just think that would be a really hard sell for the fan base and for the team to trade a guy like Xavier Howard, no matter how many first-round picks you get. So I wouldn't be a fan of that. I don't think a lot of Dolphins fans would be. But I think those are probably three names to kind of look at. A couple surprise names, which, this is kind of my educated, conversation, but not necessarily reported because I haven't heard anything specifically. But I wouldn't be surprised if they listen to, maybe something for a guy like a Minkah who hasn't had a great career so far, but has come on strong. Try to listen to offers on him. If they don't feel like Josh Rosen's in their long-term future, I wouldn't be shocked to see if they listen to, maybe some offers on him. But yeah, overall, there's not a lot as far as value that they can get. But if they really want draft picks, there's players they could sell off that could help a contending team. So I think that's it for me for my main topics. I do want to say that I'm coming out on a podcast with one of my favorite people with ESPN, Minkah. This week, I did a podcast with her a couple weeks ago. This one, we're going to do something different. She's doing an ESPN daily podcast. So I believe it's going to come out on Friday. So the early plug for that. Check that out. We're going to talk a bunch of Dolphins, the tank, perception. I'm going to share some little stories from the locker room. So I'll leave you guys with this. One question that she asked that I want to kind of give you guys a ranking of real quick. She asked me, would you rather, as a player, be a Dolphin or a Bengal? And I'm going to extend that to say, the worst 5 teams in the league record-wise, how would you rank those as far as, direction going forward? So the Dolphins, Washington, Cincinnati, New York Jets, and Atlanta, to me, are the bottom 5 teams in the league. And to me, as far as direction of where they're going, I would probably say, honestly, number 1 is Miami as far as direction because they're the only team with a true direction, in my opinion, with the money and the cap space to get it done going forward. I think number 2 out of those teams, I'd probably go with the New York Jets, crazy enough, because I do think they have some talent on that defense. They have a young quarterback, whether you believe in them or not. I think that they do have a young quarterback. They can kind of, try to do some things with going forward. Number 3, I think a lot of these teams have some issues. But I really wouldn't want to be in Atlanta's shoes. But I'd probably say they're number 3. They have a lot of expensive contracts. They're going to have to rebuild quickly. But I do think that they have some pieces there that they can rebuild quickly than other teams. And then I'd probably go. I really wouldn't like to work for Dan to play for Dan Snyder, but I'd probably go Washington Forest at 5. That's probably how I'd rank them. So I think that's it for me. Oh, I got one more question. Just because you hung on for me, I'll answer this for you, and then I'll head out. Let's see. La Harlow, I hope I pronounced that right. What do you think about the Broncos? Do you think their season's over? Yeah, and yes, their season's over. They traded Emmanuel Sanders. That to me showed that they're going towards a rebuild. I'd like to see Chris Harris freed, trade him to a contender. Maybe I'm trying to think all the teams that need a corner. Maybe you trade him to Philly. Maybe you trade him to. Let me see who else needs a corner. Everybody needs a corner. If you can get a two for Chris Harris, you make that deal. You keep Vaughn because he's your franchise, but I think they have to really start over. And I know it sucks. It's something that you don't want to hear in Denver, but I think that they're going to have to start rebuilding. And if they don't think Drew Lock's the guy, which they haven't given him any chance over Joe Flacco this year, so it shows me that they aren't giddy about Drew Lock early. I think they need to be in the quarterback market. And they're not going to be in the Tua range, but maybe a Joe Burrow, maybe a Justin Herbert. And try to build this thing from scratch because, this team is a little further away than I think they think from competing. So that's my thoughts on them. As always, thanks for joining Howling with the Wolf. Share with your friends, share with your family, and we will be back here next week to talk some more football.